people don't get healed, that's on us. We need more power. I understand the Sunday service, word of knowledge on a problem in an ear or shoulder, try to heal them, doesn't happen, go get more power, come back next week. I think I'm tracking with you there. Give me your counsel or input on family in your church. Dad gets diagnosed with cancer. It's pretty bleak, and you're praying, nothing's happening. You're trying to get more power, nothing's happening. Dad dies. The narrative's been, it's on me, and church is bought totally into that theology, and now they're left without a parent, and I'm saying that's on me. How do we deal with that?
Yeah. So, it's on you, of course. It might have been on God, right? Because God cuts the string of life for everyone eventually. But I think as a practical theology, it's far more helpful and accurate to say that, the imperfect results of healing ministry has to do with the imperfect people involved, as opposed to just kind of blaming God for everything. So a couple answers to your question directly. If I try to heal a parent who's dying of cancer and I fail, in the first instance, that's quite uncomfortable for me because I feel very badly about that. And if you get involved in healing ministry, it is a humbling and heart-stretching affair, which is a severe fruit, and it's good for us, but you will encounter these situations. I need to get really comfortable resting in grace. There is no substitute for that in life. I fail at things. I need to get really good at failure. And I know that I am forgiven by the Lord for my imperfections and my weaknesses. And if I'm not solid with that, then I don't make it through a week, and you just have to be mature in that way. If you are prone to wrestle with guilt or self-recrimination or self-condemnation or blaming others or receiving blame from others, like if you're not squared away on that and you get involved in really frontline emotional ministry like healing ministry or deliverance or any other, then you're dead in the water. And so you have to get really real with God about grace and forgiveness. And I would say then for the community, if your community doesn't understand grace and forgiveness, then healing ministry probably isn't for you. But of course, healing ministry is for you. So grow your communities up in grace and forgiveness. And I think as a practical matter, if I stay with that family and love them and sacrifice for them, even if I fail to heal the parent who's dying, the family at the end of the day still usually feels blessed by my love and service and by the love and service of other people who have walked with them through the heartbreak. In fact, consider for yourselves, the best friends in your life, the people you trust the most in the world, are probably the people that walked through dark times with you, as opposed to people who walked in triumph with you, would be my guess. So there's something about it that's bonding. It usually ends up okay. It multiplies weeping, but weeping shared is sometimes powerful stuff.
Yes, that's really helpful. Just to follow up on that, so the grace and forgiveness thing, how do we as leaders, if we're going to use the power equation, because my feeling for some of us in the room is if the answer of people not getting healed is it's on us, we're out. And I think it's interesting, Tom, actually, I'd love your thoughts on this, on guilt and shame in Ireland. And if we're talking about cultural strongholds, and that being something that needs overcome in order for us to flow fully in this ministry, how do we, what have you seen, and how do you maybe suggest we deal with some of that stuff?
Yeah, I think it's huge. One of the things I like about America, Jordan, is somehow in the education system there seems to be more of a confident, positive kind of an outlook coming out of the kids, more so than Europe. I know certainly where we're based, there's a huge thing, and I call it Catholic guilt, because you grow up within Catholicism and you got to go to the priest to get your to get right with God. And I used to go as a kid, and every second Saturday. And then, of course, a lot of people now don't do that anymore, and there's very few even practicing Catholics do that. But we're carrying the guilt, so there's a load of guilt and shame, and there is a low level of self-esteem, and we try and hide it with what we look on the outside, or being the hard man, or being a femme fatale, or whatever. So to me, it's an epidemic. And if I was to say there's one thing that is holding back the Christian church, certainly in the South, it's that people feel shameful and guilty, and they're exactly dealing with the same kind of issues as people in America or wherever, but they don't have the confidence to do it, and so they're not worthy to step out, and they're not worthy, and I'm not worthy, and you're not worthy. None of us are worthy. I'd love to give you a silver bullet, but I can't. All I know, it's constantly encouraging people and trying to build that faith-filled environment and atmosphere in our churches, and trying to get people to say that actually, yeah, you can. It's interesting. I've been trying to encourage the women and the girls, the ladies in our church to step forward. And it's funny that if you've got guilt and shame, one of the things that the lads then say is that, well, you're promoting the girls, so we're being pushed down. And can I say, guys, that's not what's going on. The thing is, in the image, we were created. God created the male and female in the image of God. So when our sisters are released, we're even more empowered to be the men that we were called to be. So it's a blessing to the men and a blessing to the women. It's like the whole aspect of who God is released. And I think it goes back to that shame and that guilt, that it's the begrudging attitude in Irish society that if someone is pushed up, you're being pushed down, and we don't like that. And our churches have got to be a prophetic voice into our culture and our community, and we've got something way different, and it's the opposite to guilt and shame. Now, I'm sure there's a different variant maybe of guilt and shame if you come from a more Protestant background. I don't know that, but it's a pandemic. It's a pandemic.
Jordan, I know you shared some of your story yesterday and your own journey with unworthiness, and I just wonder what you would say to us as a movement about this, trying to deal with it, be delivered from it. I think that's helpful language, because I think that's what most of us are trying to do. We're trying to deal with it when actually we need delivered from it.
Well, my favorite thing in the world to talk about, to teach on, is grace. And because I think it's the most foreign concept on earth. Worldly people don't understand grace. It seems unbelievable to them, and so they respond by becoming amoral, right? So, oh no, there's no judgment, there's no standard, and that feels a lot safer than forgiveness and grace and confessing imperfection. And Christians reject grace because it seems like grace is offensive to God. It seems like grace takes sin not seriously enough, right? I mean, Jesus was killed basically because the religious leaders of his day did not understand grace. Everybody thought Jesus was a licentious playboy, that he was an offense to God. That's what the priest thought, and so they killed him. Grace is hard to get, and it's hard to rest. And so at a certain point in my life, because I struggled so much with feeling like an alien in the world and feeling, rejected and inferior. I just had to become a zealot about grace. I overcompensated, although I'm not sure you can overcompensate with grace. I don't think you can be too radical about it, but I just, that's often how I handle things. It's kind of like my personality.
So can you just paint a picture for what that looked like? What did you actually do?
I came up with ways to express things about God and my relationship with God that were maximally provocative, right? So it's like, actually, Jesus hung out with broken people a lot. Like, he seemed to prefer. So I was like, how can I say that is maximally provocative? So the first sermon I ever gave in a mainline church, when I was a young kid, I walked into the pulpit and I said, Jesus is for losers. And took it from there. And what I was trying to do is sort of to talk the talk so I could walk the walk. And if something hurts it, and that's what was hurting in me, so I pressed it as far as I could go.
Sorry, did you just say something hurts, press it?
Yeah.
Expand.
If the status quo is unacceptable, something has to change. That is a rule of life. And so if I have something that causes me pain, instead of avoiding it, which is what most humans do, I run at it screaming. And that life model has served me fairly well. Even if it seems like overkill, even if it seems a little bit out of line. The advantage of feeling like a complete alien most of my life, of being like socially marginalized, and I told a little bit of my story yesterday. It was worse than that. But is that I felt so improper in the world that eventually I just turned that into a strength. It's like, well, then I will just be improper in every situation that I'm in. And I tried that once or twice, and I actually found Jesus in it, which is, I think, why Jesus says, blessed are the poor in spirit. And I actually came to believe that at a certain point. It's like, okay, if this is an advantage, which is how I read that scripture, then I'm going to turn it into an advantage. And I'm going to boast about my weakness. Most Christians boast about their triumph over weakness. And I just try to make a point to boast about weakness, and I offend people. It's like, I planted a church when I was suicidal. I would go home from prayer meetings, climb to the roof, and stand on the edge and think. That church planted 6 other churches and brought a lot of people to Christ. Deal with it. And that's me boasting in weakness. I have a bit of the story where, I felt delivered from depression, but I just want to make clear, right? That stuff was birthed out of weakness. And so that's sort of embracing poverty in spirit. And there's something about that, I don't want to be boastful, but do you feel the grace in what I just said? And that is my lifeblood. That's all I have. All I have is that grace in life. And, I still feel like a big loser. And because the life I lead is a heartbreaking life. Any kingdom life is going to be filled with heartbreak, and it's going to make you feel weak as much as it makes you feel strong. So get good at grace. I feel like I'm rambling, but did I answer whatever question you asked?
I think so.
At a certain point, I stopped paying attention to you.
Yeah, I felt that. Tom, can I ask you to talk a little bit about the Irish relationship with power? And so the kind of headline of the last 24 hours has been "Get More Power." I feel like we're afraid of power, suspicious of power. So I would love to just, if that's our challenge, right, that Jordan's brought from Honolulu, is Irish Christians get more power. Can you help us think through maybe what some of our obstacles are with that? Because I feel like I feel it in the room at times. And I definitely feel like I observe it in our culture. We have an interesting relationship historically with power, which maybe we don't want to get too much into right now. But do you know what I'm saying?
Wow.
So like we've two types of power. Obviously, the power of God moving in our churches, and then the power that comes with some type of title, with authority. It's very interesting in a multicultural church, like many of the churches in the South today are. Each of the different nationalities has a totally different relationship once they hear you're a senior pastor. Some of that I find very offensive. So, for example, this guy came into church one day about 2 years ago. I hadn't seen him. For a second, I thought he was the Lord Mayor of Cork. He had so many gold chains on around here, you know. But then I saw, and his skin happened to be black, so I knew we didn't have a black Lord Mayor. The Lord Mayor changes every year in Cork, so I don't keep up with them. But he came in, and I was on the door. I like to go on the door every now and again and just open the door and welcome people and just say hello. So he must have thought I was just the guy on the door, you know. And he really just brushed past me as if I was nothing. That was fine. But his whole attitude changed when someone introduced me to him as the senior pastor. He fained all over me, you know. And I don't see that as a kingdom attitude at all. So I see with some of the nationalities, Indian, Nigerian, they're really into the pastor. And some of it is good and some of it isn't good, but it comes from their culture. Anyway, so the Irish culture, I think, has a chip on its shoulder, and particularly the Republic, because it's a post-colonial mindset. And then within the Republic, the worst of all is Cork, because that's the rebel city and the rebel county. So we've got like a double chip on our shoulders against authority, and it's almost like the natural thing is, who's in authority? I'm against him. It's usually him. I'm against him, you know. So when people come into church, they're automatically, who's the head guy in here? Because I'll find out his weakness, you know. That's what we get all the time. And so you have to earn respect and you have to go the extra mile, and they're constantly watching. All the new people who come into church, who are coming to faith, they're constantly watching myself, my family, how we interact with one another and so on. And so it takes a long time to build respect. If you want to plant a church in the South and you say, I'm going to do it for 2 years or 3 years and then I'm gone, forget it, in my opinion. You got to really be in it for the long haul. It's a slow trust thing. And a lot of Americans, not you, Jordan, you don't strike me like this, but a lot of Americans have struck me as, and Andy and Harmony, you're so different as well. But a lot of them are kind of fast guys, you know, yay. And they come in, they do it, and they want to move on. It doesn't work, you know. So you got to build that. So that kind of power is an issue. The power of God is so attractive, though. And I hear it from even some of you this morning, just talking about people from a Catholic background coming to faith here. There's just no issue with the gifts of the Spirit. Honestly, there's not. There's a craving for the power of God and the supernatural among people from a Catholic background. We never had any teaching about cessationism or the gifts are not for today. I mean, as a child growing up, I can remember for years the healing nun came to Cork and people queued up for the healing nun, and all she had was a candle that she'd put on your throat if you had a sore throat, and that was it. And we couldn't get enough of the healing nun. We know, and then there's no issue with miracles and healing and demons. That's all fine. So that kind of power, amen. And here's what I'd finish with. If someone who's in a position of authority in the church can marry with the power, you're looking at me very weird, can marry the power of God it's a fantastic combination. It's like it breaks a curse in the culture that is rebellious against authority. And then that power of God is so attractive. And that to me is a winning combination.
It's good. So one of the things that I think I see is that most of us, and even most of our culture, I would totally agree with you, is hungry to be on the receiving end of the power of God. I think what I notice we struggle more is to be on the wielding end. So we want to receive miracles, and we want to see miracles. We'll even put ourselves in rooms where they'll happen. But what you've been really challenging us to do, Jordan, is to get more power. And I suppose my question for you is, what would you say to people who are afraid of that in themselves?
What I would recommend is embracing the practical theology of try, right? Which is why I talk about it the way that I do. I mean, there's some problems that are common. I mean, Americans and and Irish, a lot of people exceptionalize themselves out of the kingdom. We like the idea of all play as long as somebody else is doing the playing, and so in typical fashion, I go overboard a little bit and I say, no, faith is trying things, right? It's not believing things, it's trying things. And then I am non-negotiable about that. If you have faith, then you need to be trying. You don't need to adhere, right? You need to try. And just to make that absolutely necessary in our communities, And then you have to talk about failure and give trophies for failure and sort of, condition your culture in a way that empowers the trying and doesn't just glorify success, you glorify trying. And I talk about that at least every other Sunday, probably, It's like faith is trying. He wants to try something. So that people understand. That's not fancy, but it forces people to get involved. And then what I find is that the therapy is in the doing, right? You could think a lot about why this person is insecure, or why the Irish have a complex in terms of wielding power, if you do, or something like that. And I think probably my attitude would be something like this: yeah, let's get to work. And it's like, oh, you're reluctant to try. Okay, you're with me. Let's go prophesy to somebody, and go out there, and then in the course of exercise, these things tend to get worked out, right? Your emotional discomforts and stuff tends to get worked out, but it's on the job training, and I just don't think there's any other sort of training that you can do in the kingdom of God. And I stole that from Jesus, because he never said to anyone, believe in me. He said, follow me. When Jesus calls a person, he always calls that person to a purpose. Follow me, ... and I will make you fishers of men. He's always got some job in mind for you. And if you were going to be part of Jesus's church in his day, you had to be doing stuff, right? And so I thought that was a pretty good idea when I read it. And I appreciate that he was dealing in a very complex political climate that involved incredible oppression and religious guilt and all of those things. And his solution was just to cut through it all. Be like, all right, Jesus, or the Father loves you, you're with me, do a miracle.
So your power is in your purpose. How do we not become workaholics?
How do we not become workaholics? What's interesting to me about the Sabbath commandment is that God had to give it. Right? It's like he had 10 commandments, and he took one of them, and he commanded us to rest. And it seems weird that God would have to command people to take time off. Right? because one would assume that taking a day off would be something we would do voluntarily. So in a life of discipline, in a life of hard work, the first thing that you have to be disciplined about is to take rest. And so I approach that with the same sort of discipline I approach my work with. I'm a natural workaholic. I'm a really driven person. I'm very intense.
We never would have told that,
Yeah,
true.
yeah. And so I'm not naturally good at the Sabbath. And so I say that a lot. And somebody gave me a word about rest recently, and I was like, well, that's actually a really good word, because I have a board of elders in my church, and every once in a while they command me to take 3 days off by myself and not talk to anybody, because talking wears me out, and being around people wears me out. I love people, but it wears me out. So they hey, you are now going to take these 3 days off. We've booked you here in this place, and if you don't, we're going to fire you. And so that's one way to deal with it. So, I avoid being a workaholic by being as disciplined about my rest as I am with other things, and recruiting people to help me with it. Again, not a fancy answer, but it helps. You know what I really learned, the value of the Sabbath, is when I was really depressed. And I was and I came up with 4 rules to combat depression. Rule number 1 was don't panic, it'll be better in the morning. And rule number 2 was exercise and eat right, because it wears out your body. And rule number 3 was make hay while the sun shines, which is I don't feel good enough to work every day, but when I do, I'm gonna work. And that was a way of showing myself grace. And I don't mean to preach a sermon here, and then number 4 was take a Sabbath. It's the law, stupid. I wrote these on the wall, and I learned that taking a Sabbath meant not just not doing any work on it, but pretending that everything was okay. That's how I expressed it to myself, which is not theologically accurate. You're not pretending, but that was sort of the no, today I'm going to celebrate as if everything is okay. And that was something that probably saved my life too. It's the worse, the more self-condemnatory you are, I think the more healing rest can be, and the more you have to make it kind of a rule. Sorry.
It's good. No, I don't apologize. Brilliant. I want to change gears and talk about routines. We talked about routines yesterday. Tom, I know that down in Grace, you guys have some interesting routines just around even some of your Sunday gatherings, which probably don't seem interesting to you because you just do them. But when we were there, we were like, that's so interesting. You have a family every week that you pray for in gatherings. You sing happy birthday to people in gatherings, do you? And you and Michael, or at least used to, I don't know if you still do, 1,200 people, and this may just be a rumor, so tell me if it's a lie, memorize everyone's names? So that seems like a lot of time wasted to me, but can you speak to that? Why do you do that stuff?
The Bible calls it community, Andrew. Mm-hmm. You gotta let go of this old Puritan, Presbyterian-driven thing, okay? Yeah? Let's have some Mardi Gras here. Why do, yeah, so we have a thing called prayer focus. It's real low-tech and simple. But I remember I would keep a list of who was coming to the church. I remember when it hit 52, back in the day, we had 52 either individuals or families. I said, that's someone for every week of the year. Now, we're all praying for all things. Let's focus our prayer for one another, because the Bible says we should love one another, and one of the ways we can love one another is praying for one another. So we just started it way back then, and we just called the people up, introduced them. So we found there was a way of breaking down walls, and as the church was getting bigger and bigger, we began to see this is essential to build community in the church and have a larger group of people to keep that personal connection. So you're not looking at the back of someone's neck. You're, oh, that's Mary and John, and they have a little boy and he's maybe on the spectrum of autism, or maybe John lost his job or whatever. So it just really builds community, and we just make space every Sunday for that, and we lay hands on them and pray for them and so on. The happy birthdays, to me, is the most stupid thing, and it is the most profound thing you could do. It really is. Because I found myself that when people were saying happy birthday to other people, it was grand, happy birthday. But when it was my birthday, it was like suddenly Mr. Logical, couldn't care less. I kind of got all emotions. And like when people say, Tom, happy birthday, I go, they're really nice. They thought about me and my birthday. And do you know what the reality is? There's a load of people and nobody says happy birthday to them. But when they come into our church, we're going to say happy birthday to them. If they want to out themselves about it, you know.
How do you do that? I'm sorry, so you say happy birthday to everyone in the congregation? You make them stand up and say happy birthday from the front or something? What do you do?
Yeah,
we might have to steal this.
Yeah, so... Oh, yeah, okay. So, you see, this is so... Yeah, I know, yeah. Okay. So, I thought everyone did it, you know? What can I say? It kind of goes with kind of being isolated. You just assume this is the norm, okay? So, anyway, we love the crack in our church, so it's really important that you got the crack, all right? You know what the crack is, don't you? It's not cocaine.
We're not talking about drugs.
All right?
We're not.
Yeah.
Just to be clear.
He doesn't know what the crack is.
Yeah, it's like...
I'm not sure I want to know what the crack is.
Okay.
You do? You definitely do.
Anyway, so it's really important we have the crack, and we're always kind of... Okay, crack, C-R-A-I-C, okay? Anyway, so we're always ball hopping. No, we take our faith seriously. We take God seriously.
Are you talking about Michael again?
But we don't take ourselves too seriously, you know? So there's loads of crack anyway, and... Okay, and we want that kind of life-giving atmosphere. There was a guy came down to us from up here. I won't say his name, but he was a pastor, and he visited us a couple of years ago. And the lads were leading worship, and some of the small children didn't go to the creche, and they were just running around, and one of them was kicking a football. And that was grand, you know, because, like, we're worshiping God, we're a family. We don't want this pristine kind of, you know, as Michelle was saying, that corporate kind of feel. We're a family, you know. So some of the kids want to run around, that's fine with us. And anyway, we went on, we had prophesying, and we had the preaching of the word and all that. And he came up to me, he said, "You're like the IRA." And I said, "All right, thanks very much." Really, you know. Cool. Like that crowd, you know. He says, "No, you're doing church like the IRA would do church." And I said, how'd you make that out? He said, "It's a riot, but it's an intentional riot."
That's awesome.
Oh, yeah. By the way, I'm going over for coffee with Jerry Adams in a minute, so I'll let you know how it goes. Anyway, so what we do with that culture is we will, in the community bit in the middle, one of us, myself, Michael, whoever's leading the meeting, will go, right, who's got a birthday this week, a wedding anniversary, or a spiritual birthday? We'd love to hear about it, because we want to rejoice with those who rejoice, because there's enough weeping with those who weep as well. And so you'll just get hands up all over the place, and we do mood lighting, so the lighting is dark. And, you know, about 20% of our congregation are black, and by the grace of God, I can't make out anyone's face in that kind of light, you know? But they love me, and I love them, and there is no racism, and someone will put up their hand, and I'll say, "Come on, lads, you know I can't see your face." "I am Precious! That's my name, and it's my birthday." And so we're going to sing happy birthday to Precious. And we think it's really important as well to celebrate marriages that are lasting. Anyone say amen? Amen. And then the spiritual birthdays. I'm a Christian 3 years. I'm a Christian 33 years. And we got all these new Christians and they're kind of looking in awe at these older guys who've walked the walk over the years. And so we have everyone celebrating birthdays and all that. And we do it to build community. And people love it, Andrew. People love it. And so we do a countdown in Irish then, a hen, a dog tree, and then we get everyone to sing happy birthday. But I usually say this. I say, I know it's cheesy, and I know you're a really cool dude down the back, and you're going, what a stupid church singing happy birthday. But maybe the person next to you, nobody's saying happy birthday to them, but they'll get it in here. And so it's low tech, it's free. It costs a little bit of time, Andrew, but let it go, brother, let it go. Learn from the IRA, Andrew. Chucking our law.
I think it's arrived. I don't think it's coming. I think it's arrived. So one.
Oh yeah, and if it's your anniversary, the couple will stand up and they'll go, we're 5 years married or whatever. And we say, you have to give each other 5 sloppy kisses for every year. So that's our thing, you have to kiss for the year. Now when it gets up to 30 years, it's like 1 kiss will do, you know?
So the reason I've asked that question, and this is where this gets really important, is Michelle put her finger on this yesterday morning brilliantly, where we have been incredibly blessed as churches and as church leaders by some thinking and practice from all over the world. But we have also been, and I probably would use a word as strong as this, we've also been cursed by some practices from other places in the world. And one of the things that matters most to us, I think, as people from this island is community. And there's this idea that I have noticed that's crept into the church that says when your church grows, community has to function outside of Sundays. And there are other things we do where we do community small groups and home groups and other events and things like that. But Sundays just gets, sooner or later, it gets too big to do community. And what I love about what these guys do is they've just modeled something, they've just rejected that idea. And it costs, and it might seem a little cheesy to some, but I just think it is, it's so important. We, inspired by you guys, we got one of our photographers in church to just create a little photo booth to take photos of every family in church that now kind of are up on a wall in their office, and staff pray for them every lunchtime, pick a photo and pray, and we try to learn names and all that sort of stuff because...
And so, that is so important, Andrew. I mean, when the scripture says that he calls us by name, it's personal, it's individual, and if the leaders in the church remember, that's John, that's Mary. You know, I've got a very common name, Tom, Dick and Harry. But when someone says Tom, it gets personal. And I start feeling a connection. And I don't have an awful lot of time for high-powered pastors who think they're above that. You know what? If you don't love your own people, I'm not interested in hearing what you got to say. So love your people. Get to know them.
Yeah.
I write down their names every week. That's where it's at.
We're gonna do some ministry in a minute, but Jordan, I'd love to just get some thoughts from you around personal routines in creating momentum in the supernatural. So you talked about this yesterday, and I think it would be helpful for lots of us to just hear a little bit about how you've gone about that, maybe structured that, both for you personally and even for your church. Maybe there's some guys here going, we're up for this, we want to go here, but how do we create and sustain momentum in this thing, that it doesn't just be a wonderful moment or a weekend or conference, but that there's actually momentum that's sustained both in our lives and in our communities, particularly in the ministry of the supernatural?
Yeah. There's some broad questions there in what you ask.
Do you want to do personally first?
Sure. I do personally first. The first thing I'd say about my personal routines is that I have personal routines, and because that's the struggle, right? I mean, one routine might be slightly better than another, but any routine is infinitely better than no routine. So I just kind of preach that routine a lot. So you find something that works for you. I adjust my routine from time to time. Like, every 6 months to a year, I'll evaluate the way I'm doing my days and see if we can make an adjustment that makes them better. In terms of my routines and their relationship to my supernatural ministry, I do the typical stuff. I want to pray every day, and my prayers are really simple. I greet the Lord. I ask the Lord for stuff that I want, and then I listen to stuff that the Lord might have to say, and then I say amen. And that works. And then if there's a supernatural ministry that I really want to be flowing in my life, I try to give it space daily, or at least regularly in the course of a week. So if I want to get better at prophecy, I give prophetic ministry space in every day. The way I pastor at my church, the way I try to make it personal, one of the ways in which I try to make it personal is sort of impersonal, because I can't keep track of everybody all the time. So part of my daily check-in with God is who do you want me to really focus on today? Who do you want me to pay attention to today? What's going on? And the Lord will say, hey, that kid Evan? He should go to Ireland with you. And, then immediately I'll email Evan and say, yeah, what are you doing? That's just an example of making space for prophetic ministry. But, and if I need to get better at healing ministry, then I'm going to say, well, I'm going to find a way to pray, to minister to a sick person every day this week, or, on my office hour days this week, I'm going to be praying for the sick. Whatever is important, I give space to it. And I just figure out some creative way to do that. But that's the rule. Give regular space to anything you think is important. Whatever ministry you think is important. A lot of ministers will take 2 days a week to prepare their sermon for Sunday. I take 2 hours if I'm lucky. But they really prep for the sermon, And well, how do you prep for healing ministry, or how do you prep for demonic deliverance, or, it's well, you give it space, and you practice the ministry during the space. Simple, but effective. That's personal.
And then can you talk a little bit about how do you get it beyond you? So those are your routines, and you're growing in it. How do you not just be the guy who literally wrote the book that everyone comes to? How do you get this into culture of a church that's multiplying far away from you?
So lots of different answers to that, but here's my most general answer, and it will sound familiar at this point. Whatever I want to be worked into the culture and community of the church, I give it space. So in every church service, our liturgy is really simple. First, we speak to God, then we speak to each other, and then we hear from God. So, we'll open up with worship and sharing praise testimonies to the Lord. This is our offering to God. And then we'll give announcements, and we'll give the sermon. That's us talking to each other to try and encourage each other in the kingdom. And then we give space at the end of every service to hear back from God. So be pray and listen. We think the Lord might be speaking to you about such and such today. We call up the prophetic elders. What did the Lord say to you during the service? And we always hear back from God. And I wanted us to be a prophetic church, and so I decided that we needed to give that space in every church service. Supernatural ministry has to be featured in every gathering if you want it to be a cultural value. Vineyards are automatically good at that, right? Because you all do prayer ministry at the end of service, right? There's sort of a call to prayer, and so that's already part of your liturgy. You might not have known you had a liturgy, but there it is, you do. So that's me preaching to the choir. You guys already do that. We also make sure that it's part of every small group that we do. And so our small groups have lots of different personalities and lots of different structures, but we tell people these 5 values need to be reflected in every small group gathering. You're going to do fellowship. You're going to do a truth discussion. You're going to, one of the things is you're going to have a God encounter. At least you're going to try. And then we come up with ways in which you might do it. Hey, you can try this. One thing we do all over every group, every gathering, is we do the mush pot. Do you guys do the mush pot? Okay, so we get in a circle of people, and then we throw somebody into the middle of the pot, and they have this mildly uncomfortable feeling that they've been thrown into the middle of the mush pot, what would you call it here? Mush pot, like that? The porridge bowl, or I don't know, whatever, however you would put it. Throw them in the middle of the pot. And then everybody will share with them a blessing. I just want to bless you. I feel led to bless you with this. God bless your family. God bless your job. Or a prophecy, or if they're sick, everybody will try to heal them. And they're in a circle. We're doing it together in every group. And so, Evan hosts, even his wife hosts a group. If there's a newcomer at the group, they're either in the middle. The newcomers are always first in the middle. Or Evan will grab the guy's collar and say, you bless them. Okay, now you heal them. Like, what? But that's a value. And so it's reflected in every small group meeting. And by the time they get to church on Sunday, it's normal. But so we give space to whatever we want to inculcate. We make sure that it's reflected. So too with evangelism, like we could go through any number of ministries, and I could tell you how we give it space in every gathering. But that's the rule.
Wonderful.